"If you run into the storm, don't look back," I whispered to myself as the rain cut across my face like shards of ice, each drop stinging my cheeks and soaking through my jacket. Sophia Bennett's boots splashed through puddles that mirrored the fractured neon lights of Manhattan, each step a reminder that the city never slowed, never waited. The wind howled through the narrow streets, tugging at her umbrella until it turned inside out and snapped. She clenched her teeth and pressed forward, heart racing, lungs burning with exertion, when she spotted him, a man slumped against the brick wall of an alley, rain dripping down his shoulders, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, jacket torn and soaked. Sophia's first instinct was disbelief. Her second was instinctive courage. Without thinking, she pulled him into the shadowed alcove, pressing her sleeve against the wet fabric that stuck to his chest, her fingers trembling but precise. His eyes, ice blue and piercing, flicked open, scanning her face with a look that made her chest tighten and stomach churn. "Who are you?" he rasped, voice low and controlled, yet carrying the kind of authority that made her instincts scream caution. She swallowed hard, forcing a steadying breath through the storm's roar, and managed, I'm Sophia. You're going to be okay." His gaze lingered, analyzing, measuring, and for a heartbeat, the chaos around them, the pounding rain, the flickering streetlights, the slick asphalt, fell away until only the sharp intensity of his stare existed. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the alley, painting his sharp jawline and broad shoulders in stark relief. The wind snapped at her hair and coat as he shifted slightly, revealing the faint outline of an expensive watch under the sleeve of his soaked jacket, a subtle signal of wealth and influence that Sophia barely had time to register before he tensed, every movement deliberate, controlled, contained. Her own breath caught as she realized the quiet storm between them, a tension electric, unspoken, dangerous yet strangely magnetic. "Stay here," he murmured finally, a soft command that sent shivers down her spine despite the rain that chilled her too. "The bone," she nodded, gripping the wet fabric in her hands, unable to pull away from the intensity that seemed to radiate from him, the quiet danger wrapped around a presence she couldn't ignore. Every muscle in her body was on alert. The city's chaos beyond the alley seemed distant, irrelevant. She glanced at him again. Ethan Caldwell, though she didn't know the name yet, but the weight of him, pressed on her chest with the force of gravity. The rain tapped a frenetic rhythm on the brick walls, the sound of a distant car horn echoing, blending with the howl of the wind. Time seemed to slow as she moved closer, adjusting the jacket pressed against his chest, and he didn't resist. There was a flicker in his eyes, something faintly human beneath the storm of power and command, and Sophia felt a strange certainty that this encounter would change everything. The alley smelled of wet concrete and electricity, the storm weaving the city's chaos into the intimate, tense moment between them. She met his gaze, inhaled sharply, and whispered, "You're going to be fine." Not sure if she was trying to reassure him or herself, as the wind ripped past, carrying a distant siren that promised the city would keep moving even as their worlds collided. The flicker of lightning highlighted the glint of his watch, the soaked fabric, the sharp lines of his face, and for a second, Sophia felt as if she'd stepped into a different world, one that was powerful, dangerous, and yet inexplicably bound to her by this storm, this fleeting, impossible moment of fate. The rain continued to lash the alley, drumming against the bricks with a relentless rhythm that matched the thudding of Sophia Bennett's heart. Her fingers were damp and cold as she adjusted the jacket pressed against Ethan Caldwell's chest, making sure it stayed in place without slipping. Every time he inhaled, she felt the slight tremor in his shoulders, a subtle reminder that he was not as untouchable as his presence suggested. She caught herself glancing at his face repeatedly, drawn by the intensity in his eyes, the kind of gaze that made her feel exposed and yet inexplicably safe. His silence was heavy, almost palpable, but it was not threatening. It was measured, controlled, as if he was evaluating her as much as he allowed her to evaluate him. The alley smelled of wet asphalt and the faint tang of ozone from the storm, mingling with the scent of his cologne, subtle and dark, grounding her amidst the chaos. She noticed the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers twitched slightly when he adjusted his arm, and she understood that he was as alert to the environment as she was. Sophia shifted closer, using her coat to shield him further from the rain, every movement deliberate, careful not to startle him, and she felt a strange connection forming in the unspoken understanding that they were both navigating the storm together. Outside the alley, the city moved on, cars passing with headlights cutting through the sheets of rain, people hurrying by without a glance at the shadowed corner where their worlds had collided. Sophia's mind raced, thinking of the countless possibilities, each more dangerous than the last, yet she could not bring herself to pull away, could not allow him to face the wet night alone. A flash of lightning illuminated the alley for a moment, showing the stark contrast of the soaked brick, the puddles reflecting fragments of neon signs, and Ethan's features in sharp relief. His gaze momentarily softened as he observed her determination and resolve. She realized then that her own fear was tempered by an unfamiliar sense of responsibility, a quiet courage born from the necessity of protecting someone whose strength was undeniable but whose vulnerability was now in her hands. The storm howled around them, the wind tugging at her hair, the rain soaking through every layer. Yet time seemed to stretch, each second a measured breath in which the world outside fell away, leaving only the intensity of shared presence, the rhythm of hearts in sync, and the subtle exchange of trust that neither of them fully understood yet. Sophia's voice broke the silence, soft but steady. "We need to get you somewhere dry. You cannot stay out here like this." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, a question unspoken, but the faintest nod acknowledged her, the first act of acquiescence since their meeting. She moved to guide him toward the end of the alley, careful to support his weight without pressing too hard, mindful of the balance between aid and intrusion. Every step was a negotiation, each movement a silent dialogue, the city's stormy chaos framing a moment that felt suspended outside of time, charged with tension, connection, and an unspoken promise that this night, this storm, had irrevocably altered the course of both their lives. The alley opened into a quiet side street where the storm had loosened its grip, puddles reflecting the dim glow of streetlights and neon signs. Sophia Bennett guided Ethan Caldwell to the small doorway of a closed coffee shop, the awning providing a meager shield from the relentless rain. She pressed the door open with a soft push and stepped inside first, the warmth and faint scent of brewed coffee greeting her like a small reprieve from the chaos outside. Ethan followed, his movements careful, deliberate, every step measured as though he was attuned to the space in a way that most people could not sense. Sophia quickly scanned the interior, noting chairs flipped onto tables and the faint smell of stale pastry, and she moved toward the counter, guiding him to a corner where the shadows offered both concealment and dry refuge. She crouched slightly, steadying herself against the counter as she gently eased him down to a seated position, the weight of his presence pressing into her awareness more than the rain pressing against her coat. His eyes found hers, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow until only the two of them existed, the storm outside fading into a background hum that neither could ignore completely. "You need to sit still for a moment," she said, voice calm but firm, her hands brushing a strand of wet hair from her face, trying to control her own shaking. Ethan nodded slightly, his attention focused on her, an unspoken acknowledgement that he would comply, that the storm outside did not diminish the gravity within this quiet, temporary shelter. Sophia adjusted the jacket over his shoulders, pressing it flat to keep him warm and dry, noting the fine details of his expression, the furrowed brow, the brief flash of tension around his eyes, the way his jaw flexed as he breathed, and she realized that he was as meticulous in observation as she had been in movement, a predator and protector wrapped into one. The lights above flickered slightly, casting a warm, golden tone that softened the shadows and illuminated the small, tense space they shared. Sophia drew a slow breath, letting the warmth seep into her fingers and toes, grounding herself as she watched Ethan shift subtly, his hand brushing against the fabric of his jacket, the faintest sign of discomfort or fatigue, and she knew that she had to maintain a careful balance between offering support and allowing him space. Outside, the wind rattled the door, and the rain slid down the windows in heavy rivulets. But inside, the air felt charged with quiet intensity, the kind that made seconds stretch and thoughts sharpen. Sophia's eyes scanned Ethan's, searching for any hint of trust, any flicker that would allow her to understand the man before her beyond the sudden, storm-driven encounter. He gave the faintest nod, the barest hint of a smile touching the edge of his lips, enough to signal recognition of her effort, enough to anchor her racing thoughts, and she felt the subtle shift in the room's energy, the invisible line between caution and connection being drawn. She kept her voice soft, measured, speaking as much to steady herself as to guide him. "You are safe for now. Just breathe and let the storm pass." The words hung in the warm, damp air, a bridge across the tension, a promise that the night had brought them together, and that the hours ahead would test and reveal more than either could yet imagine. The storm outside had slowed to a persistent drizzle, the sound of raindrops tapping against the windows like a steady drumbeat echoing through the empty coffee shop. Sophia Bennett kept her hands moving, gently adjusting the jacket over Ethan Caldwell's shoulders, ensuring it stayed in place and offered warmth. She watched him closely, noting the subtle tension in his posture, the way his fingers flexed slightly as he leaned back against the wall, eyes scanning the dim interior with a careful precision that suggested constant vigilance. Her own heart was still racing, her breath uneven, but there was a strange calm settling in the quiet space, the contrast between the raging storm outside and the controlled hush inside sharpening every sensation. Sophia moved a chair closer to support his legs, her movements deliberate, steady, each adjustment measured to avoid causing discomfort, yet she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her chest. The faint smell of coffee grounds lingered in the air, mixed with the dampness of rain-soaked coats, grounding her senses and keeping her focused on the moment. Ethan's gaze shifted from the door to her, and she caught the smallest flicker of recognition, a trace of calculation that made her pulse quicken. She spoke softly, her voice steady but low. "You cannot stay out there any longer. You need rest, warmth, and dry clothes." He did not answer immediately, but the slight nod that followed spoke volumes, a subtle surrender to her guidance that neither of them fully acknowledged yet. Sophia adjusted the jacket again, smoothing the fabric over his chest, and noticed the faint line of tension between his shoulders relax slightly, a microcosm of trust forming in the shared silence. The light above flickered momentarily, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the grayness outside, revealing the contours of his face and the intensity of his eyes, ice blue with a depth that seemed to measure her as much as the space around them. Sophia shifted her own weight, leaning back slightly against the counter, feeling the dampness in her boots and the chill in her fingers, yet there was focus in her movements, a deliberate attention to detail that kept both of them tethered to the here and now. She realized that the storm had not only brought them together physically, but had also created a fragile connection of shared awareness, the unspoken dialogue of presence, vigilance, and cautious trust weaving between them. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, measured, carrying the faintest trace of amusement beneath the gravity of the night. "You are very careful, for someone who knows so little about me." Sophia met his gaze, steadily, understanding that words were not required to convey intent, that each small movement, each adjustment, each shared breath in the quieted storm held meaning that transcended explanation. Outside, the drizzle continued, the city moving obliviously beyond the coffee shop doors, unaware of the silent pact forming between the woman who had acted without hesitation and the man whose power had been revealed in fragments, restrained and controlled, yet undeniably commanding. Sophia's mind worked through the possibilities, calculating care, attention, and the delicate balance between help and intrusion, as the storm softened the edges of the night, creating a suspended space where trust, tension, and the first glimmers of understanding could begin to take root without words, only presence, observation, and the quiet rhythm of hearts synchronizing in the dim, warm refuge of the shop. The rain outside had finally diminished to a gentle drizzle, the sound now a soft background to the hum of the city that never truly slept. Sophia Bennett moved carefully around the small coffee shop, her movements deliberate as she prepared a few clean towels and a spare blanket from a storage closet she had noticed on a previous visit. She returned to Ethan Caldwell, who remained seated against the wall, his eyes scanning the interior, taking in the subtle details of the space with a predator's precision yet a restrained calm that fascinated her. She knelt beside him, placing the towels within reach, and gently unfolded the blanket, draping it over his shoulders to provide warmth without making him feel confined. The faint scent of wet fabric and brewed coffee mixed with the subtle, understated aroma of his cologne, grounding her senses and making the moment feel intimate despite the distance imposed by caution. Ethan's gaze followed her movements, a slight narrowing of his eyes betraying curiosity, and yet there was no accusation in his expression, only measured observation, the kind that seemed to weigh every action and intention. Sophia adjusted the blanket, ensuring it rested comfortably and did not slip, and she found herself glancing up at his face repeatedly, drawn by the intensity of his blue eyes, which now carried a hint of acknowledgement, a recognition of her care and attentiveness. The city outside continued its relentless rhythm, sirens and tires on wet asphalt blending into a distant, muffled symphony. But inside the coffee shop, the world seemed suspended, the air thick with unspoken understanding and cautious trust. Sophia took a slow breath, steadying herself, aware of the fine line she walked between helping and overstepping, each gesture deliberate, each movement precise. Ethan shifted slightly, and she noted the subtle relaxation in his shoulders, the faint easing of tension that suggested he was beginning to rely, even minimally, on her guidance. "You are steady," he said quietly, his voice low but carrying a tone of respect, the faintest trace of a smile brushing the corner of his lips, enough to make her pulse quicken and yet steady her nerves simultaneously. She met his gaze, her own resolve mirrored in the depth of his eyes, and realized that this encounter had forged a fragile, unspoken bond that went beyond the storm, the alley, and the rain. It was anchored in presence, care, and the quiet understanding that they had both navigated chaos and found temporary sanctuary. The warm glow of the overhead lights flickered slightly, casting soft shadows across Ethan's face and the damp floor, accentuating the contrast between the stormy world outside and the controlled space they now shared. Sophia moved to fetch a chair, placing it near him so he could rest more comfortably, and the subtle scrape of her shoes against the worn floor echoed slightly, drawing his attention and prompting a faint, approving nod. She adjusted the blanket once more, ensuring it covered him adequately, and sat nearby, feeling the damp cold in her fingers and the racing of her heart, yet grounded by the shared focus of care. Time seemed to stretch, each moment weighted with awareness, the delicate negotiation of trust, observation, and unspoken communication filling the room. Sophia's voice finally broke the silence, soft but firm. "We will wait here until the storm passes, and then you can move safely. You do not need to worry about anything else right now." Ethan's gaze lingered on her, a mix of calculation and appreciation, and as he exhaled slowly, she felt the invisible tether of connection tighten, a fragile thread of understanding and shared experience that would guide the hours to come. The quiet of the coffee shop held a fragile stillness, broken only by the soft patter of raindrops sliding down the windows and the occasional hum of the city beyond. Sophia Bennett moved with careful precision, folding towels and adjusting the small space to ensure that Ethan Caldwell was as comfortable as possible. She watched him closely, noting the slight easing of tension in his posture, the subtle relaxation in his shoulders, the way his eyes briefly softened when he met hers. Each measured breath she took seemed to echo in the space between them, a rhythm that mirrored the storm's retreat outside and grounded her awareness in the moment. She retrieved a small thermos from a shelf and poured warm water into a cup, the aroma comforting and faintly sweet against the scent of rain-dampened asphalt seeping through the open doorway. Placing the cup near him, she gave a gentle nudge with her finger, a silent prompt to sip, and watched as he slowly lifted it, fingers brushing hers, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. The golden light above flickered slightly, casting soft shadows that danced across the walls and illuminated the determination in Sophia's eyes as she adjusted the blanket over his knees. Her mind raced with thoughts of what the next hours might bring, yet she moved with deliberate calm, careful not to rush or impose, aware that each gesture built trust more effectively than words ever could. Ethan's gaze followed every motion, his eyes observing with an intensity that made Sophia's pulse quicken, yet the absence of overt threat in his expression allowed her to breathe more freely than she had since the storm began. Outside, the drizzle had reduced to a whisper, but the city's pulse remained constant, a reminder of the world beyond this temporary refuge. Sophia adjusted a chair so he could recline slightly, her hands brushing against the damp fabric of his jacket, ensuring warmth. Without intrusion, and she felt the subtle acknowledgement in the slight exhalation he released, a soft sign that her presence was accepted, if only cautiously. She knelt briefly to check the positioning of the blanket again, noting the delicate balance between care and respect, and in that moment, the quiet connection between them became more apparent, built from shared vulnerability and careful observation. Every small movement carried meaning. Every glance exchanged held weight. Ethan shifted slightly, his eyes momentarily softening as he regarded her with a measured curiosity, the faintest hint of trust threading through his otherwise controlled demeanor. Sophia straightened, taking a slow, grounding breath, aware that the night was far from over. Yet for now, the storm's retreat had granted them a fragile sanctuary where presence, attentiveness, and the quiet exchange of mutual regard defined the moment. She spoke softly, words deliberate and calm. "Rest now. The storm will not touch you here." And the warmth in her voice seemed to settle the remaining tension, creating a fragile thread of connection that neither fully understood yet instinctively respected, a silent acknowledgement that their worlds had collided in a way that would ripple far beyond this night, shaping decisions, trust, and the moments that lay ahead. The storm had passed completely, leaving the city streets glistening under the pale glow of streetlights and the occasional flicker of neon signs reflecting in puddles. Sophia Bennett remained near Ethan Caldwell, who had shifted slightly in his seat, the blanket still draped across his shoulders, his posture a mixture of guarded awareness and quiet recovery. She moved carefully around him, tidying up the small space they had claimed in the quiet coffee shop, adjusting chairs and blankets with a careful precision born of the need to maintain both comfort and safety. Each movement she made seemed amplified in the stillness, the sound of her breath and the subtle creak of the floorboards echoing faintly, a reminder that they were alone in this shared moment of fragile calm. Ethan watched her with that same measured gaze, noting the meticulous care with which she attended to the details, the small, deliberate gestures that conveyed competence, empathy, and quiet determination. He remained mostly silent, yet his presence carried a weight that filled the space, his eyes following her movements, absorbing information, calculating, and yet subtly acknowledging the effort she made to create a temporary haven. Sophia could feel the tension in his body easing gradually, the way his shoulders relaxed slightly, the faint exhalation that suggested the first hint of trust forming in the space between them. The soft glow of the overhead lights illuminated the faint lines of weariness in her expression, the damp strands of hair clinging to her face, and the subtle shifts of emotion as she measured each action, each word, each gesture. Time seemed to stretch, each second drawn out by the quiet, the weight of the previous hours of rain and exposure, and the unspoken understanding that had developed through shared presence and careful observation. Sophia's voice, calm and steady, finally broke the silence. "We will wait here until morning. You will not need to move until the world is ready for us both." Ethan's gaze met hers directly, and for the first time, she noticed a faint shift in the color of his eyes, the hint of acknowledgement, a recognition of her role not just as helper, but as participant in a fragile alliance. She adjusted the blanket once more, smoothing the fabric and ensuring warmth, and watched as he exhaled, the tension in his jaw releasing slightly. The smell of wet asphalt and faint coffee lingered, a grounding sensory detail that reminded them both of the storm just past and the temporary refuge they shared. Sophia took a slow breath, steadying herself against the awareness of how extraordinary this encounter was, how extraordinary he was, yet tempered by the quiet, human vulnerability now visible in subtle gestures, in micro-expressions that spoke volumes without words. Ethan shifted slightly, moving a hand to adjust the blanket, the action precise, controlled, yet not unkind, and Sophia understood the exchange, a silent dialogue of trust, observation, and acknowledgement, each moment layered with careful intention. Outside, the city resumed its rhythm, indifferent to the small, charged universe within the coffee shop, the distant sound of traffic and occasional sirens forming a muted symphony behind the walls. Sophia kept her eyes on Ethan, noting the careful relaxation of his shoulders, the subtle softness in his expression, and she allowed herself a fraction of a smile, a quiet acknowledgement that this night, this encounter, had created a bond that would ripple far beyond the storm, shaping every thought, every action, and every decision in the hours to come. In the dim, warm light of the shop, with the blanket draped securely over his shoulders and the quiet understanding between them, Sophia realized that they had both crossed a threshold. The storm had ended, but the encounter had only begun, and the fragile connection they had formed would guide what came next. Morning light began to filter through the coffee shop windows, soft and diffused, painting the space in pale golds and muted shadows that stretched across the damp floor. Sophia Bennett shifted slightly, keeping her attention on Ethan Caldwell, who remained seated, the blanket over his shoulders now warm and dry, his posture relaxed but still deliberate, each movement careful and controlled. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the faint aroma mingling with the lingering scent of rain and the subtle traces of his presence, grounding her as she considered the events of the night. Ethan watched her with quiet intensity, eyes following her movements, noting the careful precision of each gesture, the way she moved without hesitation yet with measured awareness. Sophia adjusted the chair near him, ensuring he was comfortable, and the soft scrape of the legs against the worn floor punctuated the stillness between them. She knelt briefly to smooth the blanket, and he allowed her the moment without comment, the trust implicit in his stillness, a silent acknowledgement of the care she had shown. Outside, the city hummed to life, distant traffic and the occasional siren weaving a subtle rhythm. Yet inside the shop, time felt suspended, each second stretched by the quiet awareness of shared presence. Sophia spoke softly, her voice calm, deliberate. The storm has passed. You can rest now, fully, without worry. Ethan's gaze lingered on her, the faintest exhalation escaping him, the smallest shift in expression revealing acknowledgement and a hint of gratitude. She allowed herself a fraction of a smile, feeling the tension in her chest ease slightly as she realized the magnitude of what had occurred. The storm had brought them together, and this quiet sanctuary had allowed a fragile connection to form. She moved a small chair closer, placing it where he could lean comfortably, and noted the subtle adjustments in his posture, the way he shifted just enough to relax, yet maintained that controlled awareness that made him both commanding and approachable. The light caught the contours of his face, highlighting the intensity of his gaze. The fine lines softened by the warmth of the shop, and Sophia felt the subtle ebb and flow of emotion between them, the unspoken dialogue of trust and observation that had developed over hours of shared focus. Her hands, slightly damp from handling the blanket and towels, moved with careful precision as she ensured every fold and crease contributed to his comfort, each action deliberate and mindful. Ethan's eyes met hers, a long, steady look that conveyed recognition of her efforts, respect, and the first glimmer of understanding that extended beyond the events of the storm. Sophia exhaled slowly, feeling the quiet hum of connection settle in, a thread weaving between them, delicate yet unbroken, a silent promise of attention, presence, and mutual awareness. The city continued its pulse beyond the windows, indifferent to the small, charged universe inside the coffee shop. Yet within this space, every gesture, every glance, every breath formed a tapestry of tentative trust and growing understanding. Sophia adjusted the blanket once more, smoothing it over his shoulders, and as she stepped back slightly, she realized the storm had ended, but the encounter had only begun, and the hours ahead would reveal the depth of the fragile bond formed under rain, shadow, and quiet, careful attention. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the coffee shop, casting long, golden streaks across the polished floor and illuminating the lingering traces of the storm outside. Sophia Bennett moved carefully, her eyes meeting Ethan Caldwell's, noting the faint but unmistakable shift in his posture, the subtle relaxation of shoulders that had been rigid only hours ago. She adjusted the blanket over him one final time, smoothing each fold, and stepped back, taking in the quiet, suspended energy of the space they had shared. Ethan's gaze followed her movements, sharp yet softened by the unspoken acknowledgement that had grown between them, a connection forged not through words but through shared presence and attentive care. Sophia reached for a chair to sit nearby, her hands still slightly damp from handling the fabric, and as she lowered herself, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to register the significance of what had unfolded. The city outside moved forward with its familiar rhythm, the faint sounds of traffic and distant voices threading through the windows. Yet inside the shop, time felt elongated. Each second weighted with the quiet gravity of the bond forming between them. Ethan shifted slightly, leaning back with controlled ease, his eyes tracing the contours of the room before settling on Sophia, and for the first time, a trace of warmth and recognition appeared in his expression, a subtle acknowledgement that he had depended on her judgment and presence without hesitation. Sophia's breath caught, a mixture of relief and lingering adrenaline, as she realized the trust that had developed was fragile yet palpable, a tentative understanding that had taken shape through hours of storm, tension, and mutual observation. The soft hum of the shop's aged heater mingled with the faint aroma of coffee and rain-dampened air, grounding them both in the present and reinforcing the quiet intimacy of the moment. Sophia adjusted her position slightly, ensuring her own balance and comfort while remaining alert to Ethan's slightest movements, aware that each small action carried significance in this delicate dynamic. The sunlight shifted as clouds continued to break above the warm illumination, highlighting the subtle details of his expression, the tension easing from his jaw and shoulders, the faintest hint of a nod passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the shared experience and the mutual care that had defined it. She allowed her gaze to linger for a heartbeat, absorbing the gravity of the night's events, the storm outside, and the calm after the storm within, and she understood that this moment, however transient, had created a connection that neither could ignore, a tether of awareness, attentiveness, and cautious trust. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, measured, carrying the weight of the unspoken hours. You acted without hesitation, and yet, you did not falter. Sophia met his eyes steadily, the quiet intensity mirrored in her own expression, and as she exhaled slowly, she recognized that the storm had ended, but their journey was only beginning. The fragile thread of trust and connection now extending forward into the unknown hours of the city, guiding decisions, actions, and the unspoken understanding that had taken root between them. A bond that would continue to shape their shared moments long after the last raindrop had dried.